Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday, September 5th, 2024. Ready for a great day? Whee! Here we go. I just found out that I could make $10 bazillion doing this podcast. Well, all I have to do is be pro-Russian, I guess, or at least pro-Republican. I'm not certain which one triggers it, but I think it has to be about being pro-Russian. It's back in the news. Apparently the Russians are up to something, and they're trying to actually manipulate our election. Again, surprise, I can't believe it. But at any rate, this is one of the things that the media are paying attention today, because there's some courtroom developments. There was a hook for their paying attention to this stuff. But, so far it's been very interesting, a re-illustration once again for about the 50th time. And some people are only discovering it for the first time. They're younger. They're trying to make it in whatever the hell business it might be that we consider a business these days. But podcasting, independent journalism, investigative journalism, what have you. Substacking, I don't know. And finding it difficult, but finding out that there are idiots on the right, know-nothing morons, essentially, who just stick to a script. It's handed to them. Well, essentially, it's handed to them by the Russians. They insist that they didn't know the Russians were handing it to them, or that they definitely weren't. I just happened to agree with them 100% of the time. And they were making millions in podcasting and media appearances and God knows what. I've always wondered how this happens, but, we did stop a little bit on a different genre of that kind of grift, the Jacob Wall, Jack Berkman style grift, where the shell companies move things in order, to hide payments to you for your various stunts, the dissemination of your conspiracy theories, your occasional press conferences, hiring people to record robocalls to tell people the wrong day to vote, et cetera, et cetera. But more lucrative than that, it's and always baffling to me, why this would be the case. But millions of dollars available for people to do terrible podcasts full of crap that just isn't true and get paid for it. And story breaking once again, not only that there's millions available for idiots to do this in the name of right-wing propaganda, but nothing available for anybody to do anything that's actually true or actually analyzes the news. But if you want that, you got to support it yourself, which brings me to Patreon, of course, which is exactly how we're able to do it and justify doing it and spending all this time on it here at home. And I know, this isn't exactly the time that I was planning on doing it, but it is right here in front of me. My card of who's been boosting donations or signing up lately, I just have a couple of names that I wanted to mention. Rebecca Romans, longtime supporter, found the long sought-after way to boost donations at Patreon. I've had a couple of people say, I'm having difficulty finding it. It's not intuitive how I can do that. And I think Rebecca was among them. She found it, and maybe we could get her to do an explainer at some point in case you're looking for the same thing. But back on September 1st, also joined us over at Blue Sky. Long time we've been waiting for her to flee the Twitters and come on over here. Another, a pseudonymous new supporter, A Rural Noise. That's the pseudonym we're going with. A Rural Noise joining us on the same day. This self-same day of September 1st. I had missed, though, on the 31st of August, Gary Oliver, also a longtime supporter who has finally made a subscription on YouTube, subscribing to the video / actually all audio, but whatever, they do videos at YouTube. But subscribing to the feed there, another way to help us sort of boost ourselves in algorithm world. So I want to remind everybody that you can go over and do that. And you can never look at it again if you don't want to. But it helps us out a great deal, I think, or it's supposed to. We're going to try it. It's no skin off anybody's nose. And we're careful about noses here. So I encourage you to do it. And thanks to those who have, and thanks to those who have boosted their support, because we got a long way to go to catch up with these guys. Greg Dworkin has sent me a number of clips today. That number is three wonderful clips. And I sort of do have like we said, we have some sort of, there we go. We got that. And we'll cut off the rest of the music. We'll just, then after that. There's lots of video and audio evidence of just how terrible the whole scheme is and where all of this craziness is coming from. But there's more than that. There's also a big breakthrough in the reporting these days. I guess cracks appearing in the dam. Major newspapers, major columnists trying to break through now and finding the courage to say, hey, Donald Trump may be mentally unfit for this job, maybe mentally unfit for auditioning for this job as a candidate. And slowly but surely, a few people breaking through. We haven't seen, the Peter Bakers and Maggie Habermans of the world adopt that stance yet, but you got to start somewhere. Greg Dworkin has it all rounded up. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. So thank you for noting that we have 3 clips that we're going to play at least.
3, 1, okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to really interrupt things again, but I do love that thunder and lightning. Yeah. And even though I should just edit out their music, which, what is that? Young Frankenstein, I think that comes from. So.
Well, if it doesn't, it should.
Yes. All right. Well, things, right?
So.
Yeah, you sent me some kind of German.
There's a word that I've learned that absolutely has to be used. I will mispronounce it and mangle it, but nonetheless, the word is backpfeifengesicht.
Sorry, what?
It's German, and it means this is a face that is just begging to be slapped. There is no English equivalent, but it's a wonderful
not in
word.
One word.
Backpfeifengesicht.
You sure that's not
that is just begging to be slapped?
Yiddish and about chicken heads
many
or
of
something?
These influencers that have shown up that, not just Frau Blucher, but also that word. That word be used.
Farvergnügen is about as... All right.
But I have to say...
Good job on it, I think.
Given the fact that these bozos were getting paid $100,000 per podcast.
Oh, what?
You need to triple your salary.
Oh, my God. Yeah, no kidding. Holy mackerel. It's so insane. Honestly.
You can't even begin to talk about it.
No.
But it's nuts. However, you have to step back and look at the big picture.
If I could get $100 a podcast, it would
Russia
be great.
was putting, $10 million into this. But then again, Egypt was putting $10 million into Donald Trump's pocket, allegedly.
Yeah.
So $10 million appears to be the going rate from foreign agents. Of course, China was trying to influence New York Governor Kathy Hochul through her aides. And there's the Mar-a-Lago. You could just sit by and take notes at any given dining room discussion with Trump and his security aides. And, what I'm trying to say here, I don't want to forget Bob Menendez.
No.
The money is from foreign companies,
he was a
and it's all over. And that's why I was just struck by this particular comment from David Rothkopf, who said on Twitter, between tip of the iceberg DOJ revelations that MAGA was a wholly owned subsidiary of the Kremlin, the Liz Cheney endorsement, which we'll get to, Trump's visible mental deterioration, which you mentioned, is now being covered, and the strength of the Harris-Walz campaign, boring but true, today was a very bad day for Trump and the GOP.
Hey, all right. I'm glad for that.
I wanted to give you an idea of exactly what Tim Pool was being paid $100,000 per podcast for. So the first clip I have for you is a very brief snippet, one of his rants. It's only 47 seconds.
Okay.
But it's worth listening to so you have an idea what's going on here.
All right, let me move it to, I should have done, I did some special editing and cut it up and boosted it and everything, and then I realized I need to stick it into the soundboard for ease of playing. And let me get some of those things in here.
But you're an expert at doing this on the fly.
Sure, yeah, I'm flying right now.
But don't worry, folks, trying this at home. I let David know about these last night, so we had plenty of time to do all of this, except he didn't.
Well, you know what I did? I took it right up to the driveway and then parked it in the driveway, and then everybody's like, okay, the car's in the garage, right? Hold on a second. Okay, Tim Pool. Right. That's what we're doing first?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right, here we go. Let's roll this. So this is the clip of Tim Pool doing his
show,
Kremlin's work.
Timcast. So to give you an idea of the sort of thing Russia was paying for.
All right, here we go.
They know it. But I don't know that it matters anymore. This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country.
Oh my.
Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
What?
They are expanding this war. Now, don't get me wrong. I know. You've got criminal elements of the U.S. government pushing them and guiding them and telling them what to do. Wow. Ukraine is now accused, a German warrant issued for blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, triggering this conflict. Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and to the world. We should rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support, and we should apologize to Russia.
By the way, his production value no better than ours. We're on a par there, and we hesitate and hem and hawk just as much. I would do this for considerably less money.
Easily 8.
Yeah, right. No problem about it. I love that one. So Ukraine is the biggest enemy of this country and the
Ukraine
world.
Is completely being funded by criminal elements in the Democratic Party. I mean, if you wanted to know
we should
why,
apologize to Russia.
Russia would pay $100,000 per podcast. That's it.
I guess so. I can't even imagine.
I mean, he claims 1 million listeners, which is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
But, just to give you an idea of some of the sort of things that we're talking about. However, the really interesting part about all of this isn't Tim Pool, who's never interesting.
Well, that was...
Or Tucker Carlson, who wasn't mentioned in the indictment, I don't think. Or if he was, it was I don't know, maybe his Russia shopping spree in a Russian supermarket, which was bandied about as to should we play this or should we not play this. The thing is, and here's the story in the Tennessean, Russian propagandists use Tennessee content because everything's local. That's why I like to look at the Tennessean.
Tennessee content, okay.
Yeah, Tenet, the media company that Tim Pool works for, is a Tennessee company. Tennessee content company to push disinformation. An indictment unsealed Wednesday alleges the Tennessee Content Creation Company was a tool of a team of Russian propagandists used to infiltrate U.S. audiences with Kremlin-backed messaging. 2 Russian nationals who work for Russia Today, known as RT, a Russian state-controlled media outlet, were indicted on accusations they funneled nearly $10 million to a Tennessee-based online content creation company to publish English-language videos on social media like TikTok and YouTube and others, including X. The company's more than 2,000 videos posted have been viewed more than 16 million times just on YouTube, according to the indictment. It doesn't identify the Tennessee company, but descriptions in the indictment match those of Tennessee-based Tenet Media. In other words, the indictment mentioned the promos that the company uses, which word-for-word match Tenet Media. Now, Tenet Media is owned and operated by a couple of Americans. I don't have their names right in front of me, but I remember...
George Tenet. I don't know.
Well, no, but I remember there's a husband and wife.
Oh.
And they were not indicted. And the husband's name happens to be Liam Donovan, which is not the same Liam Donovan as the person who is a Republican media commenter on the internet all the time, who I often quote. And I wrote to Liam and said, I know you're not this guy, but I want to introduce you to Michael Cohen and Matt Gertz and, a couple other people that are going to give counseling sessions because you know why. And he wrote back and said, I have a T-shirt that says, I'm not that Liam Donovan, and I'm just pointing to it right now.
Yes, well, T-shirts answer a lot of questions.
The point is they were not indicted. The people who were indicted were Russia Today people who were doing the funneling. The people who owned the company were not indicted. And the people like Tim Pool, with the slappable face, were not indicted. They were described as dupes.
Yeah.
They were duped. They were fooled. Okay.
I mean, they were.
And,
but you need to do that for indictment purposes. Okay.
Yeah. But the interesting part about it is that Andrew Weisberg said, I looked at the indictment. You know what's really interesting? The people who owned Tenet Media, Liam Donovan and his wife, who managed the thing, are not mentioned hardly at all, other than the founder 1, founder 2, but they're not indicted, which makes me, Andrew Weissman, who's an expert on this sort of stuff, think that maybe there's a sealed indictment for them and they have turned state's evidence.
Ooh, okay. That's entirely possible. That's a good explanation.
All right.
For it.
And since Tim Pool and and Dave Rubin and some of the other influencers who are getting paid to do this like to go down wormholes and rabbit holes about conspiracy theory.
I guess so. How do they get on YouTube? I don't understand.
How about this one for a conspiracy theory? Okay.
All right.
Because as Casey Michael, who wrote a book about it, says it's been wild to see the upsurge in foreign lobbying-related prosecutions as Bob Menendez, Henry Cuellar, I left him out, Azerbaijan, NSC official for South Korea, Hochul aide for China, RT for Russia, and this is all like in the last 2 weeks or so. And
very short period of time.
As part of it, there was this weird thing that was circulating yesterday.
Yeah.
And that is that there was a memo from the Trump campaign.
Yeah.
That said, you all who work for us, there shall be no leaks. If there are any leaks, you will be fired. And of course, that was promptly leaked.
Yeah, right.
But the point is, why are they doing it now? Maybe
the leak
it's
memo,
because
or why?
One of their employees in New Hampshire just the other day said, you know what, New Hampshire's lost.
Oh.
They're pulling all their money. They're not campaigning here. I work for the Trump campaign, and I'm telling you, like internal stuff, like New Hampshire's gone.
That's why
they promptly fired
have a new leak policy.
Maybe.
Okay. That's
maybe,
a theory.
Because the Trump campaign is having sort of an emergency call with the U.S. Congress MAGA people on Friday. Maybe it's because this RT thing has them spooked, and maybe it's just, as David Rothkopf said, just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, if I were Ron Johnson, I'd be calling my office. Or Rand Paul, or maybe Jill Stein, who's not in Congress. But, how deep is this? How is it only them?
I don't know, but I don't know how they're going to get them to work on Friday. I mean, that's a bad day for a... Yeah, but,
They can do it from the plane.
I guess. That's Thursday. All right. Well, good luck trying to get their gang together on a Friday. I'm glad they planned it that way.
But I'm saying, what's going on here?
I'm saying they're not going to work.
Well, maybe they never work, but what's going on here and how deep is this, and why are they scared about it?
It's a good question.
And even if it's a Friday they don't work, they're still scared on Friday.
Look, that's true. There's certainly no good reason why anyone, much less Tim Pool or any of these guys, should be getting $100,000 more than once in a year for anything at all. To get it daily or for
even
each podcast?
No, it's $100,000 per podcast.
Weekly?
And me, they do it 4 times a week. 4 times a week, right?
That's crazy.
So they're getting $300,000 to $400,000 a week.
Oh my God. We haven't come close to $100,000 yet over 10 years.
Really give me a raise because I'm being
Oh my gosh, Scott too, and all of you. You know what? If we were getting $100,000 per podcast, first of all, we'd have 2 million listeners because I'd be paying listeners. Come here, listen to this. Here's $10. I'd be giving away.
Here's a story from the Atlantic, which was written before all of this.
What does he even do with it? He's not, grooming. With it.
But the question is what's going on
he may be grooming
children, and how deep does this go? In a different context, somebody else had said, so far this election there have been essentially 2 October surprises, except they happened in July and August.
Non-Octobers, yeah, right. Although there's Halloween candy on the shelves.
Big events that could shake and shift the election in major ways.
Okay.
One was the debate fallout, and the switch from Biden to Harris, which, certainly changed the election in a very, very big way.
Okay, that was very non-biased.
So that's certainly something that's highly important.
Yes.
The assassination attempt was a big thing, and it turned out not to be a big thing in the sense of lasting effect. Which is pretty amazing when you step back and think about it.
Yes, it's amazing. A presidential candidate was shot or nearby a thing that got
remind you because you probably forgot.
Yeah, that's the
right.
thing.
You didn't forget that Harris took over from Biden, but you probably forgot that Trump was shot at.
Yes, he may have forgotten. Right.
Whereas every day you see Harris, you go, oh, I remembered she.
Well, that was like, this is a positive change. That's good
besides,
news. I like that.
Trump keeps saying, like he did at his fake town hall yesterday, which wasn't a town hall because he didn't take questions from the audience on Fox News. It was an interview with Hannity with an audience is what it was.
Ghost town hall.
Right. So he mistakenly said, but when I'm running against Biden, a couple of different times, different ways. So that's one of the ways where the media does, in fact, focus on his mental acuity. But the point I'm trying to make is you can't get away from the fact that it's Harris, not Biden.
Yeah.
It's just such an overwhelming thing.
That is a good point. Here's $100,000 for that point.
What I'm saying is that the third event is that it turns out that one of the pillars of the Trump campaign is that in 2016 there was the Russia hoax.
Right.
It's not a hoax. As it turns out, in 2024, there's an indictment. There's an indictment of right-wing media. There's an indictment of MAGA people. This is their space. This is their info system.
Yeah.
And that's the third event that's going to be in
October.
Right. We're surprised it isn't in October. And it's going to have ramifications. It's going to have major implications in terms of how this stuff is covered by the regular press, let alone Trump's mental deterioration, lying, and other things that wind up showing up on the press that you didn't think was there because, like, why haven't you covered this for 9 years? Mm-hmm. But again, we talk a lot about permission structures. They're important.
Yes.
And, this Russian influence campaign is permission structure for the media to talk about what's exactly wrong with the MAGA campaign, with the Trump campaign. What's going on here? And I think that's one of the reasons why they're, as they say, battening down the hatches and getting everybody in the same room and saying, only we shall talk to the press. You shall not talk to the press, or you will be fired, or worse.
All right. Well, it's a good idea for them to try to do this, although, the problem is that their own hired hands, and including their candidate, are just not what they used to be. I guess probably the greatest PR success that Donald Trump had as president was getting people worried about making accusations about connections to Russia. And because it worked on me, so therefore it's the greatest, was that, very early on I was like, I believe that these connections exist, but it feels funny to be saying, yeah, it's all being controlled by Russia, because that's usually what right-wing conspiracy theorists think. But it turns out all Republican accusations are confessions. We just didn't know it quite then. Now I feel a lot better about it. Yeah, now I understand why they were saying, or setting us up to look like we were, or to doubt our own view of things and our own sanity, realizing that everything had been controlled by Russia. It was always the provenance of right-wing conspiracy theory, but as it turns out, they were just telling us up front, that's what we're going to do. Huh?
Right. So Greg Sargent had a nice piece here. To imagine what real coverage of Trump's mental unfitness might look like, I took 10 real Biden-age headlines and rewrote them around Trump's unfitness for the presidency.
Very popular on social media this morning, this list.
Yeah, and it's a great list.
Okay.
10 behind closed doors, Trump shows signs of slipping.
That's just true. Is that really a headline? No. It was a Biden headline. Now it's a Trump headline.
Why the dishonesty issue hurts Trump so much more than Harris. Again, just switch them. A claim about transgender Americans puts Trump's relentless lying back at the center of 2024. These are written by Greg Sargent, just tweaking a word or two from actual headlines. Trump's penchant for unintelligible rambling back in spotlight after verbal tirades. Erratic rants at rallies aren't just theatrics. They're a profound and growing problem for Trump.
Right? Yes.
Trump at 78, forceful and aggressive, but sometimes confused and addled.
Yeah. That's a real story. Yeah.
Right? Trump dismisses questions about mental soundness in interview as he tries to salvage election effort. You get the idea. You take the Biden stuff and you just tweak them. Because these are all Biden headlines about Biden's age. And they're all true about Trump. Yeah. And you need to see them. And so that's why Greg Sargent did that.
Good. Yeah. So, addressing a big complaint people have had. Where is this stuff?
Right. I want to refer to this Atlantic article by Helen Lewis, who wrote this before the Russia story broke, because it's fascinating and puts into context and perspective a lot of why this is so important. It's called Trump's Red Pill Podcast Tour.
Oh, Red Pill.
Is this an election campaign or an extended ad for energy drinks?
Well, I'm not buying that drink, but
right?
Yes.
One weirdness of listening to Trump talk for any length of time is amid the syllable minestrone, he occasionally says something that is both intelligible and honest. And one such moment came during his appearance on the popular podcast hosted by the computer scientist Lex Fridman this week.
Lex? Really?
Yeah, Lex Luthor.
Yeah,
to get the word out, Trump said, is important in politics, and television was becoming a little bit older, maybe less significant. The online sphere, podcasts and forums such as Spaces or Twitter has usurped its importance. I just see these platforms as starting to dominate. They're getting very big numbers. Now, that's not quite true. Primetime television still commands mass audiences. And Trump's ex-chat with Elon Musk in August was plagued by the kinds of technical glitches you don't get at a traditional media company. Nonetheless, in the past few months, Trump's become a fully fledged broadcast bro. Talking with the live streamer Aiden Ross about the prosecution of Young Thug, shooting the breeze with the YouTuber turned wrestler Logan Paul about German Shepherds.
Turned wrestler. Wow.
And interrogating, he pretended to be an athlete and wasn't, and interrogating the former stand-up comedian Theo Von about cocaine. His running mate, J.D. Vance, meanwhile sat down with the Nelk boys, where he manspread luxuriantly between cases of their hard seltzer, Happy Dad.
I don't even
proprietary energy drink or iced tea, or a copy of their book is usually floating around in the back of any one of their shots. So we'll do more of this after the break, but you have to remember that Trump and Vance especially are pretending to be manosphere influence peddlers with the same sorts of people who might get paid by Russia.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. That was 50 grand right there. Just saying that. This is a pretty good racket. I had no idea. Russia,
I
if you're listening.
by the word now that you mention it.
Why not?
Well, why not? It's because I have to keep track.
Oh. All right. Or mislead your clients.
You couldn't afford it.
Right. I'll tell you what. Yeah. Why don't we just do a blanket 100 grand and call it even? I'm reminded, by the way, this is also kind of not new. One, it's definitely not new news about the Russians doing it, but if you've been around long enough online, it used to be that they would just give you, I guess, the predecessor to Substack. You just post fabulous articles about Malaysia. For instance, Malaysia was, I think, one of the first ones to be revealed as being in this game, handing over vast sums of money to conservative columnists / bloggers who would then write about, the fabulous, economic expansion in Malaysia, and you all have to be invested in Malaysia for some reason. And I forget who was getting that money, but
probably CNN. And then they spent all that money on Malaysian Airlines disappearing, and 24/7. And Malaysia said, it's probably not a good idea.
All right. Well, I can't remember.
Of course,
I'll
that's
look it up.
Complete speculation. We have no proof of any of that.
Right. But there was proof of a real thing about the Malaysian government, and I think it probably had to do with that enormous sovereign wealth fund, hedge fund thing that a number of people we've mentioned on the air. It's a big financial web. There's lots of money floating around. Lots of people are tied up in it. But I'll find the old articles about it. But there were conservative bloggers and columnists just totally taking money, and their names that you would recognize too. Not that you can't remember, but you would recognize. You would have your memory refreshed.
You might recognize Tim Pool. I've never listened to Tim Pool. The reason I wanted to play that clip is because I've never watched one of his shows, and now I have, and I said, oh, okay, I get it. I see what they were paying him.
Well, I mean, it's quality content if you're the Kremlin. There's no doubt about that. Also, I was a little bit intrigued by the other guy who was a podcaster turned wrestler. I've heard of wrestlers turned podcasters, but I don't see how podcasting gets you ready for wrestling.
That he was going to do just like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk were pretending to have a cage match. You know, I trained for a week and now I'm going to take on some real wrestlers and get my head handed to me.
Okay,
that's been done.
Yeah,
there was a comedian who did that and got hurt.
Yeah.
Andy,
right. Oh no, I've blanked on his name too. But yes,
Andy something.
Andy,
who I never thought was funny, but it's been done. In any case, also before we get back into this Atlantic article about podcasters and influencers, I do want to mention two things just because I'm afraid I'll forget if I don't. First of all, France has a new prime minister after that election. You may recall the leftists won. Everybody was deriding Macron for pulling a spot election, but what he was trying to do is keep Marine Le Pen and the rightists out of power, and guess what? It worked. So the leftists had the most votes, but Macron refused to acknowledge it for a while, and then dragged his feet about actually appointing a new prime minister, and he didn't do it from the leftist party. He actually appointed somebody who's a center-right person, whose name is Michael Barnier, and he is from the Gaullist party, and he was the EU negotiator with Great Britain about Brexit.
Okay.
And Taniel has two tweets explaining a little bit about what's going on, just so that folks know. France has a new prime minister. Macron chose Michel Barnier, a conservative politician from the Gaullist party. This makes explicit the long tacit alliance between Macronists and conservatives, and Macron is choosing somebody he thinks the far right won't bring down. And that was one of his goals.
Oh.
Because if you put a leftist in there, then there's an immediate no confidence vote in the French parliament, and then you got to do the whole thing all over again. He didn't want that. So the left coalition won most seats on July 7th, roughly 190. A priority for Macron was to avoid them governing because he didn't like the left. The right had roughly 40 seats, and Macronists only had roughly 170. So, the combination had a little bit more than the left, but the left was the biggest of the non-majority parties. And Le Pen's party had 140. So Le Pen couldn't govern. The left didn't have enough to govern by itself. And the Macronists plus the right in combination were still in a position, with Macron being president, to make these decisions. That's what he did. He did it for political reasons. It just might work, as Chuck Todd might say. And so hold off on making fun of Macron. He may have pulled this off.
Well, I got to hold off on saying anything about it so that I can understand it. It's a little arcane, but okay. I mean,
well, in a parliamentary system, you got to make coalition stuff.
Right? We don't
think
understand
of the
that
traffic
here.
Light Coalition in Germany.
Okay, I will.
Because each of the parties has a red, yellow, green.
Right.
Traffic light coalition. That's how they do things in
They
Europe.
need a bit more colors.
So there's that. And then the other thing, which is also a big story, but we won't be, at least I won't be talking about it a lot, is the school shooting in Georgia. We don't have enough information. We know 14-year-old killed 14-year-olds and two teachers who were trying to protect their lives because you know about those union thugs who masquerade as teachers. All they do is go into classrooms, take care of your kids all day, and try to save their lives.
Right. Donald Trump probably thought they were trying to do transgender care.
Union thugs, all of them, yes. So there's that. And
back under that
more
cloud.
to say on that when we get more information. But it's a day ending in Y, and so this happened.
Right.
Interestingly, Morning Joe this morning had somebody who's an expert on foreign affairs who also is quite qualified to talk about this stuff on. He was there to talk about the Russia story. Was well versed in France, could have talked about that too, but instead he was asked about the school shooting. His name is Chris Murphy. He's my senator, and he was the perfect person to have to talk about all of these topics. Okay. Unfortunately, he's a subject matter expert in all of it.
Yeah, yes. So he has become.
So anyway, don't want to forget about those things. So looking at the foreign connection here, The Atlantic goes on to say, in this presidential election, both candidates are mostly avoiding set-piece interviews with traditional outlets, but only one can rely on a ready-made alternative media ecosystem. Kamala Harris finally did her first full-length sit-down last week, bringing Tim Walz along as a wingman. Oh, here's the Tim Walz story.
Yeah.
So the floundering Trump campaign is trying desperately to smear Harris and Walz because it's the only way they can win.
Sure.
They can't make Trump more popular. They have to make Harris and Walz less popular.
Mm-hmm.
So Tim Walz's brother doesn't like him. They're estranged. Sounds like a normal family.
Yeah, or like Paul Gosar.
And Jeff Walz hasn't endorsed Trump, but made it be known he didn't like Walz's liberal politics.
All right.
Okay. And then said, and boy, I could tell you stories. So right-wing media picks up on this. It's the kind of thing that Russia pays for. So they found somebody, I don't know from which outlet, doesn't really matter, to find Jeff Walz and interview him and said, tell us those stories about Tim Walz that you alluded to. The country needs to know before the election. And, big scandal, right? So Jeff Walz says, well, I'll tell you about Tim Walz. When we were kids, he used to get car sick and nobody wanted to sit next to him. That's the entirety of the story.
Well, I mean, he's got a point. I wouldn't want to
sit next to him either. But what's that got to do with anything in regard to the election?
Well,
Nothing.
See.
Well, if that's all you have.
I don't know. It's interesting that he thought that was an interesting story. I mean, it's a colorful story. Well, probably very colorful.
It's not even colorful. I mean, it tells you more about Jeff Walz than it does about Tim.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know.
But
it's weird.
Wait, there's more.
Oh, okay.
So then it turns out
he also
right-wing media was trying to push this story about the Walz family rejecting Harris and voting for Trump. So there was a picture of maybe 7 or 8 of the Walz family, W-A-L-Z apostrophe S, adding the apostrophe S.
What?
Usually it's just an apostrophe after Z, but that's the way they did it.
Yeah, all right.
Walz's for Trump, and maybe 6 or 7 of them.
That's an ES, should be. But okay, not that, they're
well,
undocumented immigrants and they don't know. Yeah.
That the people in Tim Walz's actual family have no idea who these people are, so they traced them down, and it turns out that Tim Walz's grandfather's brothers, children,
great uncles,
second cousins, or first cousins once removed, can never tell the difference. Anyway, that's who those folks are. So they're like distant relations. Tim Walz doesn't even know who they are. Is that a scandal? No.
Yes. No.
They all still live in Nebraska. And Nebraskans, like Donald Trump. Hello, so what?
Not the ones in Omaha.
Not the ones in Omaha, but Omaha's not the entire state.
They get a say of their own, though.
Right. By the way, there was a poll the other day showing that Trump was leading Harris in Oklahoma. Is that news? Well, it was, because it was only by like 17 points.
Oh, well, Russia thinks it
should be 109 points. That's usually what it is.
Right. Well, that's something.
Anyway, but having mentioned Tim Walz, I wanted to get those in before I forget about it.
The family thing is always interesting. The other,
what they think is scandal is interesting.
Yeah. The scandal is that when there are estranged relatives like that, and they're actually close, as in, say, Paul Gosar's family, the weird thing is the normal people are out there being doctors and dentists and mailmen and I don't know, I guess they're not milkmen anymore. Now they have it. Bespoke, milk from. Anyway, the point is the normal people are going on about their lives, and the weirdo is in Congress, and they can't stand it. But that's his actual siblings. But all right, well, they found one sibling of Tim Walz, and
so you mentioned
he
Tim
got
Walz, and it turns out people like Tim Walz,
did.
and none of this stuff works.
You did.
But Kamala Harris did her first full-length sit-down last week, according to The Atlantic, bringing Tim Walz along as wingman. Instead of submitting Harris to adversarial accountability interviews, her team is wildly outspending the Trump campaign on digital ads, taking the Democrats' message directly to the voters. But the Republicans have a cheaper, punkier strategy: hang out with the boys. The funniest component to the Trump campaign's media strategy so far is his commitment to dipshit outreach, said Max Reed.
Yes,
the constellation
I
of
saw
influencers with whom Trump has become enmeshed does not yet have a widely accepted name. Manosphere comes closest.
That's a good one, no?
Right. The Ultimate Fighting Championship boss Dana White's sprawling empire posters on Elon Musk's X. I'm just reading what's here.
Yeah.
And the male-dominated stand-up comedy scene. That's where Joe Rogan actually comes out of, and as well as Ultimate Fighting Championship.
Yeah.
This is a subset of the podcast world with its own distinct political tang. It's suffused with the idea that society has become too feminized and cautious, and the antidote is spaces dedicated to energy drinks, combat sports, saying stupid things about Hitler.
It's just throwing that in there.
That is what they do.
Yes.
So these podcasts are often self-consciously anti-intellectual, says the author, marketing themselves as the home of deliberately dumb acts, edgy jokes, rambling conversations about UFOs and sports statistics. That's why Tim Walz is perfect for that space, because he's comfortable there. Yeah. Of course, he would say, no, that's true, and that's not true. But you want to talk sports? I'll match you.
Yeah.
Play. Their spiritual daddy is Joe Rogan, but whereas he presents himself as a disaffected liberal, the new generation is happy to back right-wing causes and candidates, the Nelk boys, and others who have endorsed Trump for president. Now, Lex Fridman, who started out as an AI intelligence researcher, is not part of the dipshit circus. He's a smart guy who covered some genuinely uncomfortable topics with Trump, such as the former president's association with pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, and his repeated suggestions that the 2020 election was stolen. But the arc of podcasting is long, and it bends toward interviewing tech CEOs about their morning routine. Fridman is now known. This is a great article.
This is good. What is this?
For dressing like the protagonist of the video game Hitman, being a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and responding to any criticism of his softball style by saying he's all about love. He really seems to think if he could get Vladimir Putin and Vladimir Zelensky on his podcast, he could sort things out. This whole unfortunate Ukraine war business stuff.
Oh.
So he talks a little bit about Fridman, but it gives you an idea of the sort of outreach that Trump is reaching for, again, written before the Russia story. And my point is, how many of these people are in fact either influenced by or directly paid by Russia?
You had that
question, and you famously sorted out the comment that Kevin McCarthy made about Dana Rohrabacher and Donald Trump being the two people who are obviously under the pay of Vladimir Putin. But it turns out there's a lot more than that. And the question is, how many in Congress?
That's a good question. I mean, since the former guy who eventually served briefly as Speaker of the House said it was so. And my favorite point about the whole thing is that actually the whole discussion was supposed to be about Ukraine. And I don't know, magically somehow the discussion about Ukraine got derailed into discussions of who's getting paid what by Russia. So this story has been in our consciousness for quite some time. It's amazing that it's only now breaking through. Amazing also that Helen Lewis here has the key to it published. I mean, I hope they pushed it to publication to catch this wave, but obviously written, as you said, before this story broke. And by the way, the title, just so you know, here on this show, you know, we're up on these things too. Trump's Red Pill podcast tour. Last week before, we spent all that time. I slogged through it over several days. The story about Curtis Yarvin, who posts as Mencius Moldbug, just to give you some weird Dungeons and Dragons style look into where his psyche is at, as being the quote-unquote intellectual godfather of this whole movement and the inventor, essentially, of the use of the term red pilling entirely, and a founding father of the school of thought that has given us Blake Masters and J.D. Vance, who also came up through this same wacko podcaster world.
Right. And so since you mentioned that, I just have to read one more paragraph from the Atlantic article because it covers a lot of what you just said.
This is great.
To consume these podcasts back to back is to have the sensation of your cerebrum gently oozing out of your ears. The most listenable bits, sadly for American democracy, are when they meander onto UFOs or drug-sniffing dogs or whether Trump has been in a fistfight. Trump was asked that, and his answer was, I'd love to say I fought my way through the Wharton School of Finance. I mean, this is the kind of comment that endears Trump to this audience. He's himself manifestly the same kind of dramatic, gossipy, mal-developed, attention-seeking nuisance.
Yes.
Trump is, as the creators who populate the greater dipshit media economy.
Damn.
This is wonderful stuff.
I love it. I mean, and I love the terminology. I don't love having to bleep it that many times, and maybe we won't. At this point, we'll give up on it. But
well, this is just the written word.
That's right. It's not your fault. So, but although sometimes it's funny to bleep it, but this is a good word.
Let's move from the sublime to the serious. And,
Trump did not fight his way through.
Clip
Wharton,
number 2.
By the way, he was driving around in a burgundy limousine that matched his leisure suits.
And family money got him in.
Well, yes. But he is well remembered there for driving around in ridiculous, like, color-coordinated limo suit boot combinations.
Right.
Gross.
So let's move out of the world of Russian influencers and the manosphere.
Let's move into it again. Yeah.
And to the arena that we mostly live in, which is the real world,
man.
And how women are just so much braver than men anyway. And prime example number 1 is clip number 2.
Oh, okay.
There were 3 clips.
I am ready.
But this is clip number 2.
This is Cheney.
This is the Liz Cheney.
Okay. We didn't number them, I know. Or you did. Maybe you did.
Well, we did one.
Yes.
And so this must be 2 because I have a third one.
Unless we're doing them out of order. All right.
We are doing it.
Are we rolling it? Are we ready to do it, or are we introing it any
further?
Okay.
Because we're here in North Carolina.
And here we are. The audio of this one is a little shaky just because it's recorded on an audience member's phone in an auditorium.
Amateur equipment, but she's at Duke talking at the School of Public Policy.
Yeah. Now, that's not her fault, I don't think. Comment. But anyway, she's at Duke. Is she a Duke grad? I don't even know.
I don't know.
All right, I'll look that up one day. So there's chairs creaking.
It is crucially important for people to recognize not only is what I just said about the danger that Trump poses something that should prevent people from voting for him, but I don't believe that we have the luxury of writing in candidates' names, particularly in swing states. And as a conservative, as someone who believes in and cares about the Constitution, I have thought deeply about this. And because of the danger that Donald Trump poses, not only am I not voting for Donald Trump, but I will be voting for Kamala Harris.
Wow. Now,
audience reaction's great, but really important because there's plenty of Republican conservatives who aren't voting for Donald Trump, but are spinelessly scared to say so in public.
Or they're coming up with some weird reasons for I'm writing in God or something. All that creaking and groaning that was going on in the chairs moving. It sounded like, well, we're coming to you live from below decks on the HMS Bounty, sailing over the South Seas here, but it works. She just said the magic words. A Cheney, I mean, there are no more dyed-in-the-wool Republicans than Cheneys, and super conservative ones at that. And she was, when they finally kicked her out, wasn't she chair of the House Republican Conference? I think it's like the 3rd or 4th ranking Republican in the House. I mean, this is why they kicked her out. But she was a real high-ranking Republican. And just saying it's not enough to say, well, I'm not going to cast my vote for Trump. You must affirmatively do everything you can to make sure that he loses, and there's only one way to do that.
Right, and that's why I want you to play clip number 3.
3, okay.
This is Squawk Box.
Oh, no.
It's right-wing nutjob host Joe Kernan.
Yeah.
Middle-of-the-road person Becky Quick. And in comparison, lefty Andrew Ross Serkin, who's way to the right of either of us, but compared to the other two.
Okay.
It's like that. And Squawk Box is interviewing one Pat Toomey.
Really? Okay. I mean, I did see that was the case, obviously, but I mean, what is it with ex-Pennsylvania senators? They just can't stop interviewing these guys.
So could you play that a little bit?
Yeah,
it's a little longer, but I think it's important.
By the way, I looked at this clip. I don't believe any of the people besides Pat Toomey and right-wing nutjob that you mentioned speak.
No, but I just wanted to set the stage.
But they were there watching. Yeah, okay, here we go.
Because Kernan and Serkin often argue.
Yeah. Well, it's time he went and got a Pop-Tart.
And you look at the presidential race. You know, you guys like Paul Ryan, that tell me, you give me a list of reasons why Kamala Harris would be the worst thing to ever happen, but still won't vote for Trump and say something like, well, it's not really a vote for Harris, and I'm not really, I just can't. Because it is a binary choice. So a vote not for Trump is a vote for Harris.
So a couple of things. First of all, I voted
this is Toomey, okay.
for Donald Trump.
I know
twice,
you did, but
16
but
and
we're
in
not
2020.
talking about.
But when you lose an election and you try to overturn the results so that you can stay in power,
we all are familiar.
You lose me. You lose me at that point.
Then
you should.
So you prefer Kamala Harris.
Hold on.
You would prefer Kamala
Harris.
I've never seen them so antagonistic with a Republican guest before, but okay. I've never seen them. So there's that.
That the outcome is a binary situation, but my choice is not. I have the choice, and you and I are just going to disagree on this.
What if it came down to one vote? And it was yours to put Kamala Harris, and then it is yours.
It is an acceptable position for me to say that neither of these candidates can be my choice for president.
It's going to be one 28% corporate taxes, 45% capital.
I get it. So the answer to that is Republican control of the Senate. And that is absolutely essential.
You can goes out for another 3 minutes.
This is a remarkable follow-up questioning, by the way.
Yes.
The sort that they would never do for anything else. Anything.
Because what it does is it reveals not so much about Toomey, but about Joe Kernan and where he's coming from.
Yeah, no kidding.
He's basically saying, never mind all that stuff about democracy, killing people, being influenced by Russia, putting people in jail when they don't deserve it, making fun of immigrants.
Right.
What about unrealized capital gains, man?
Yeah.
Doesn't that trump everything?
It should.
And normies are looking at this and saying, what are you talking about? But
I don't know.
If you want to know why Pat Toomey won't vote for Harris, or why other people say, I'm never going to vote for Trump, but I can't vote for Harris, for some of them, this is why. Some of them are being paid by Russia to say that, but for some of them, this means so much more than anything else. And I don't understand it. It's not my world. But this is what people vaguely mean when they say, well, yes, but Trump is a businessman. They don't mean Trump is competent and knows how to run the economy. What they mean is my taxes will go up.
Yes.
That's what they mean, and that's all.
No businessman would ever raise my taxes. They would charge me outrageous prices.
The fact that the economy has done better under Democrats than Republicans is not what they mean when they say Trump is a businessman. They mean you're going to raise my taxes. Joe Kernan just says it.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so good. And Toomey doesn't really have an answer for it. He said, I can't argue with you. Yeah, taxes will go up, and that's anathema. But I can't vote for Trump. But if you don't vote for Trump, then you're going to get higher taxes.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of remarkable. I mean, Toomey won't be honest and go all the way, and won't be honest with himself, and is doing everything he can to not say that he's going to vote for Harris. And he might not. I think that's probably true. But I do want to point out, and as he's saying, well, yeah, I understand taxes will go up, but he's saying that, he's willing to risk it because, I guess, of the various dangers and how you lose me when you try to overthrow the government. But Pat Toomey, I should remind everyone, I think, is one of the original, if not founding members of, or at least rejuvenated. I think he may have inherited the group and rejuvenated the Club for Growth, which is still sticking around for whatever reason.
But I think he also voted for impeachment.
Was he there even to do that? I guess maybe. Yeah, probably on his way out the door.
Congress. So, he means it when he says that about Trump. So I give him that.
Yeah.
But it's just so interesting that for these people, taxes somehow or other override democracy and everything. Not for Toomey.
Yeah, but that's the interesting thing.
For Kernan.
For having been the Club for Growth guy, those are the people who would say, well, my club is for growth and I'm more about taxes than democracy, but not the actual Club for Growth guy.
That's why I understand why Toomey might not vote for Harris.
Yes.
Kernan is a lost cause, and you look at him and say, what is wrong with you?
I do not know. But if I ever find out.
Liz Cheney said, I'm with the Club for Growth on taxes. I'm with Joe Kernan on taxes. But let's be real. January 6th overrides everything. And as a conservative, I'm for the Constitution. This is Joe Scarborough's position. And there's no way I'm not voting for Harris, and I'll do everything I can to get her elected, not because I like her policies, but because Donald Trump is absolutely unacceptable. Kernan can't even begin to fathom why anybody would do that, let alone come to that conclusion himself.
Yeah. I don't know. And it doesn't even really, in the end, make any economic sense either, but this is what they've taught themselves.
No, that's why I call him a right-wing nutjob. And he doesn't even have the insight to realize what he's doing.
No. And maybe he doesn't have to. How much is he getting per episode from Russia? I don't know. But these people clearly believe it, and the Russians have done a terrific job keeping them focused on that, even though there's now, less than no empirical evidence that their philosophy has ever been even partially correct.
Right. But so as we end, because we're getting to the 9:58 hours here, Tara Palmieri from, I think she's from Puck. Yes,
Excuse
Puck
me.
News, says, this was yesterday, a new leak. This is the actual memo here. Trump's co-campaign managers, Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, warned staff in internal email to stop talking to the press with the threat of termination. There must be a hot story in the works. This is before the Russia thing broke.
Oh, maybe that was I hope there's another
one. And I'm thinking, well, it's probably that.
But wouldn't it be great if that was a second bad one?
I think that's probably more so than some low-level staffer that they never heard of in New Hampshire decided to resign publicly. Or decided to say something publicly and get fired. Doesn't matter. But, it's a big story, and they're still scrambling on how to deal with that. So that's what you should be following today. And by the way, the good pollsters are still in the field.
Yay.
And they're doing their polling stuff. So over the weekend or Monday, we'll find out some real polls. So don't worry about where Harris is in the polls.
All right. We won't. They're in the field, along with the Academy of St. Martin. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are, I don't know, apparently we have another hour of the show to do. So, Russia is bribing everybody, except me. I mean, would I take, probably not Russian money. It's interesting to ask the question of how it all works, right? Like, it's very interesting to watch these influencers say, no one ever told me what to say. And I think that's been the big defense. Anyone who's ever been on the show knows that he never told us what to say. Well, that's not the way that's supposed to work. Tim Pool and others say, well, Russia never told us what to say. And on the one hand, that's what I would say if there were indictments out, so that I didn't get indicted. And two, I would probably lie regardless. Because you'd be like, I'm ashamed of myself. This is a terrible thing for me to do. But my suspicion is that it works a little bit differently. And it's just along the lines of a Russian entity that you may or may not know is Russian offers sponsorship of your show. It may even be indirect, like they pay Spotify and Spotify says, great news, your show has been sponsored, and Spotify will pay you $100,000 per episode, which you probably, honestly, at some point you have to say, something's wrong here. There's just not $100,000 to be had for my garbage. And it doesn't make sense, and I'm overcharging and whatever, and this is clearly dirty somewhere along the line. But it may very well be, well, look, just keep doing what you're doing, and these are the inputs that, we already know you gravitate towards. And we don't have to steer you. That would be the least culpability for anybody involved if that was the way it worked. Or it could just be like, well, you should know that their sponsorships are coming in. And a lot of them are, Russian. You wouldn't say it's the Kremlin. But it's funneled through oligarchs, I'm sure. And the private companies are doing sponsorships. And they probably do remind you from time to time, these guys are Russian and they're pretty sensitive about the Ukraine thing. Besides, and they may even suggest there are alternative views that aren't getting widespread coverage in the mainstream media, and part of our whole thing is we cover the things that the mainstream media won't, and so therefore you should be reading. For instance, this guy, Mencius Moldbug, over here, for some reason, says different things about Ukraine, and you should read what he's up to. I heard J.D. Vance and Blake Masters think that guy's brilliant, and those two guys went to top schools. So for you who might not be an intellectual powerhouse, maybe you are spending your time in Barstool Sports World or something like that. You want to get up to speed and educated on international politics? Take a gander at what this idiot has to say. Well, okay. So there we are. And there are a lot of things to catch up on and dwindling amount of time to catch up on them. So let's do one. I don't know. Let's do nothing because I can't make up my mind. Let's do this. I have at the ready Marcy Wheeler on this subject. Now, Marcy, as you know, is so into this subject and all subjects surrounding it that she knows ins and outs off the top of her head that the rest of us don't know. And even if you are a regular reader of her blog, sometimes it's difficult to follow her threads and her leaps between stories that she's covered in the past because it's organized in her head in ways that it might not be organized in your head. But like our podcast and like Donald Trump, the one thing we all share together is we do, in fact, weave these things together. Donald Trump in psychotic fashion, the others of us in more organized and coherent fashion, and yet it doesn't always come across quite that way. Here's what she has to say. I mean, I'm sure there's actually 25 things that she has to say and has said on the blog about what's going on, but I think this one is top of the list at the moment. What do we got? Don Jr.'s online buddies allegedly demand $5 million from Russian shell companies to say nice things about his daddy. That's the bottom line of it, as Marcy sees it. And a good point here, not to this point, you know, from any of the excerpts that we read from Helen Lewis's excellent sounding article in The Atlantic, nobody made the point that these are Don Jr.'s pals. This is Don Jr.'s world. Don, who has time to sit around and listen to idiots who know nothing gab about maybe sort of sports like wrestling and MMA, which I don't even know. Maybe MMA will turn out one day to be as fake as wrestling. I have no idea. But it's not a thinking man's sport, as far as I can tell. Perhaps one or two of you will object, and you can tell me how intellectual and how intellectually important MMA is to you, maybe. I don't know. I never really got the wrestling thing either. But anyway, look, the point is, you're existing in this world. Who has time to sit there and listen to idiotic podcasts like that? Well, you're listening to an idiotic podcast, but you find the time. It's 2 hours. Not all of you listen to the whole thing. I remember I have comments all along the way saying, get rid of that other idiot. I only want to hear Greg, you know. So, but hours and hours of several podcasts. Who could possibly make time for that? And the answer is someone who's not working because they're just sitting on a pile of generational fraud, if not generational wealth. That means that they never have to work a day in their life. And you should keep in mind how much time was spent, or, you know, how many people made this point when the issue of the day was, who the F is J.D. Vance and how did he get nominated for vice president? And the answer is same thing. An extremely online choice driven by Don Jr. and to some extent Eric, and the fact that he spends his days in this world immersed in this crap. All right. So a good reminder of that in the headline from Empty Wheel. Don Jr.'s online buddies allegedly demand $5 million from Russian shell companies to say nice things about his daddy. Oh, I'm going to be distracted again. Let's see if I can come back to the Malaysia thing. Reminder out there, somebody, to come back to that later, because I did start to get some names about who was doing this stuff. Okay. Where was I in all this? Oh, yes. I don't know. I'm looking at so many different inputs here. Don Jr.'s online buddies, right? When DOJ announced today that's yesterday, September 4th, that it would unseal legal actions against Russian influence operations. The former president's failed son, the oldest of them, complained, "Here we go again, LOL." And of course, that's an accusation that something is wrong with these indictments, but every accusation from a Republican is a confession. So here we go again, he says, LOL. Some hours later, it became clear that a number of right-wing influencers, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson, were unwittingly on the take from Russia via Tenet Media, which DOJ alleges in a new indictment is a front company for RT. Marcy says, I consider myself a connoisseur of well-written indictments, and this, released days after Labor Day and implicating a number of Americans, may be one of my favorites. Ooh. Start with the 2 crimes alleged, like the innermost layer in a Matryoshka doll. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I'm thinking about the pronunciation. Matryoshka, is that right? You know the Russian stacking dolls. You might even know how to pronounce them at this point. And maybe I did it right. The indictment only charges 2 things. First, conspiracy to violate FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, right? I think that's it. 18 U.S. Code Section 371, in case you follow these things, based on just only charges. What? Okay, I've lost the theme of this sentence. The indictment charges only 2 things. First, conspiracy to violate FARA, based on just only charges for overt acts. Okay. I'm not even certain what this is supposed to mean, but there are 2, a FARA charge, all pertaining to RT persona Elena Afanasieva. Okay? And then some bullet points. Okay, I admit I've lost track of what's going on here, but it's all written down. You can take a look. Konstantin Kalashnikov's edition of Afanasieva to Tenet's Discord server in August of 2023. Afanasieva's circulation, I don't know how I'm pronouncing this thing, circulation of 841 video clips that got posted onto Tenet's social media channels, possibly including the video of Tucker Carlson getting off after shopping in a Moscow grocery store. And Greg mentioned something about that one, so I'll take their word for it. I don't know. Tanning his testicles, apparently not making the cut here. Tenet's June 2024 authorization for Afanasieva and Kalashnikov to post on Tenet's platform, and 30 wire transfers to Tenet through countries including Turkey, the new pronunciation, Turkey, the Emirates, the United Arab ones, Mauritius, Czechia, and Hungary. Yeah, we forgot about Hungary and the various dreadful Hungarians.
That's dreadful Hungarian.
That's the one I'm talking about. That one is Sebastian Gorka, but Orban is just as dreadful, of course. All of this ultimately going through a bank in New York City. New York City. Yeah, New York City. The second charge, conspiracy to commit money laundering. That makes sense, given all the paths this money is taking. Describes only that Kalashnikov and Afanasieva, my best guess at this, used a variety of means to hide that RT was paying for all this. And I mean, RT was hiding that the government of Russia was paying for it. Russia and government wants it done. They make the oligarchs pay. They transfer money to RT. I'm imagining this is what goes this way. RT transfers the money to Tenet. Tenet transfers the money to God knows who, maybe through podcasting platforms, I don't know, and then all these other countries, et cetera, et cetera. Boom. Dumb people are getting $100,000 per episode for crap. How long are their episodes, by the way? Just wondering. Maybe there are probably people who might consider paying me $100,000 to shorten my episode to 1 hour or half an hour. Anyway, the point is that to prove the FARA charge, one, you'd need only prove if Kalashnikov and Afanasieva showed up in the U.S. for arrest, which I guess they won't, well, then you'd need to prove that the two RT people succeeded in influencing U.S. politics and deliberately hid that they were doing so on behalf of a Russian entity, and RT is sufficient. You wouldn't need to show that RT was paid by the Russian government, though you could probably imagine that that was the case. You wouldn't need to. So you'd have to show that they worked through cutouts, the two people who run Tenet Media, and through them, the influencers like Tim Pool and Benny Johnson, who got duped. We'll allow them to pretend they were getting duped the whole time for purposes of this indictment. And that requires you showing how RT set up fake personas, including a fake funder named Eduard Grigorian, as a front to use to convince Pool and Johnson that this was all legit, so that after one of them, and I believe this is Pool, asked for more information about whom he'd be working with, they would have ready answers. And here's a screen cap of an information page about Eduard Grigorian, and he's supposedly less suspicious of a person, given that he has this weird bio page and has it illustrated with a photo of him peering longingly, I guess, gazing out of the portal window of his private jet. Oh, they've come. Greg's landscapers have come to mow our lawn today, so that should be pretty good. Should get pretty noisy as they hit all the downed branches from the recent hailstorm. Anyway, one of the other figureheads, either Johnson or Dave Rubin, complained about this fake funder. FBI mocks them all because they kept spelling his name wrong. Now, he was complaining about the fake funder because he used woke language. Commentator 1, whichever one that is, had a problem with the profile we sent over, specifically the reference to social justice. I think it may be because that's usually a term used by liberals, but we're trying to create a conservative network. And I guess that's a giveaway. That led to a Zoom meeting that the persona, Grigorian, may have missed because they effed up the time difference between Paris and Moscow. The same clowns as usual. By the way, this reminds me a little bit of the Jacob Wall, Jack Berkman story we read yesterday, inventing fake personas to make the whole thing work, but then just effing up basic stuff like, why do you keep calling me Jacob when I'm undercover as Jay here in this thing? Or what time is it in Moscow? Or, well, can we convince you that our Grigorian guy is the real deal? Well, you could if we let me meet him. All right, we'll have a Zoom meeting. And then the fake guy fails to show up. Not necessarily because they effed up the time difference, but because he's a fake guy. He can't show up. But I'm sure they hired somebody to pretend they were him. And he still effed it up. There's some real clown show stuff in this, Marcy continues, but it didn't matter for Pool and whichever one is commentator 1 because they signed contracts worth over almost $5 million a year or $100,000 per non-exclusive video. I'm not really sure how this is working out, but it's far too much money for any of them to be able to touch. I mean, come on. The money laundering part of the indictment describes that RT has laundered $10 million, and I'm sure that's nothing to them, $10 million to pay for Tenet's work. But, it keeps grifters up and floating, like $100,000 for the whole year would put me so far over the top. I mean, it would solve a lot of problems. I'll say that. But $100,000 an episode? Gosh, this is the most irritating part of it. Anyway, this brings me back, Marcy says, to the logic of the indictment. As noted, it's all focused on the Russians, and even there, the evidence in the indictment consists of IP addresses showing they accessed Tenet servers from the same IP address that they used to access their Gmail accounts from Moscow. There's undoubtedly a lot of SIGINT, signals intelligence, behind what the U.S. government knows about the operation. It's not necessary to prove criminal charges, all this SIGINT, but it helps. And there's no First Amendment equities because Afanasieva and Kalishnikov are both overseas, and I think that probably had something to do with the way they structured the indictments. It may be, as we were told earlier, and we were, Andrew Weissman? Hinting at, there may be sealed indictments against the other people which caused them to flip and turn state's evidence. That could certainly be it. But it also works to the advantage of the people driving the story for the DOJ, because the immediate pushback probably from right-wingers is, yargo bargo, First Amendment. Remember, Elon Musk is a First Amendment absolutist, free speech absolutist. How dare you, First Amendment, da-da-da. Well, none of the people who have First Amendment rights in jeopardy here have been charged, so what's your problem? Right. Oh, well, I don't know. I don't understand law or the Constitution or procedural aspects of criminal prosecution, so, yeah. Well, that actually answers all the questions. So, it's not necessary to prove the criminal charges, no First Amendment equities here, because the people who actually are charged are both overseas, from whence they can assert no First Amendment rights. Even if DOJ hadn't missed the 60-day window for the election by 2 days. Oh, I see. Remember, you're not supposed to do these things too close to an election because something influencing the outcome, even though this is a case being brought against people who are trying to influence the outcome of the election. You can't say, well, we're too close to their being successful to charge them now. That doesn't really make any sense. But okay. The deadline really is for charging people with other criminal activity that might not necessarily be aimed at influencing elections. I've been bribed, although that is, influencing the outcome of an election in the sense that, well, after the fact of the outcome of the election. I want you to do things for me when you're in power. But if you are taking bribes, stealing money otherwise, accounting for things in funny ways to cover up your theft of money from the campaign, that stuff they will wait and charge you with later. But if you're actually trying to change the outcome of the election, I don't really know that deadline should apply. But, it would be a slippery slope, people would say. And they'd probably be right. But this indictment will continue to work for, she says, and if they hadn't missed the 60-day window by 2 days, there'd be no election implications for the same reason. That is to say, because they're prosecuting 2 foreign nationals who are currently overseas. That's unlikely to affect the outcome of the election. They don't vote in it. They are not candidates in it. They are not supposed to be directly supporting any candidates, even if it turns out that they were. But this indictment will continue to work for the next 2 months until the election and thereafter. In the presser announcing this and other legal action, DOJ emphasized that this investigation is very much ongoing for people like Poole and one of the other commentators, so long as they claim to be duped by these awful Russians. They're in the clear legally. Interestingly, Poole has ties to Cassandra Fairbanks, who was targeted by RT in 2016. I remember her, and she was one of the weirdos who was hanging out with the original, the OG weirdos, Milo Yiannopoulos, O'Keefe, various other creepy weirdo figures. I remember that name too. And but okay. In fact, Poole has posted to just that effect. I'm a dupe, etc., saying my statement regarding allegations and the leaked. And that's a sick. So, well, I guess it wasn't leaked. It was released. DOJ indictment. Should these allegations prove true, I, as well as other personalities and commentators, were deceived and are victims. I cannot speak for anyone else at the company as to what they do or to what they are instructed. You're going to listen to this guy's podcast? The Culture War podcast was licensed by Tenet Media. It existed well before any license agreement with Tenet, and will continue to exist after any such agreement expires. They just won't get $100,000 for everything. The only change with the agreement was that the location of the live broadcast moved to Tenet's YouTube channel. Never at any point did anyone other than I have full editorial control of the show, and the contents of the show are often apolitical. Examples include discussing spirituality, dating, and video games, except guess what? Dating has long since been politicized by these wackadoodles and their misogyny. And, of course, video games was a prime entry channel for Steve Bannon and his gang of weirdo wackadoodles to politicize and, well, what did they always say they were doing to the video gamers? Red pilling them? Where did that come from? Curtis Yarvin? Okay. The show is produced in its entirety by our local team without input from anyone external to the company. So lots of nonsense. That being, let's see. TCW is a separate company, the Culture War, not associated with timcast.com or other properties. How could that possibly be the case? It exists solely for the production of Culture War podcast. That being said, we still do not know what is true, as these are only allegations. And then he throws in this defense. Putin is a scumbag. There's more. Russia sucks donkey balls. Can you say that? I don't know. We'll note to self. We'll ask about that one. And blah, blah, blah. And to the journalists who wish to jump the gun, create their own narrative, or lie about what's going on, you can, something to his Irish ass. So I don't really know why you would put things that way, but what a tough guy, roar. Anyway, he's taking bribes. So Tim Pool is now on the record with donkey balls, as she points out, but there are other people, certainly the two founders of Tenet, whose actions might be crimes, either foreign agent and or sanctionable crimes. DOJ doesn't tell us about the fate of those people. Perhaps there are other indictments buried somewhere. Perhaps they're coming. Anyway, read the whole thing. It's a tale of right-wing grift, sloppy operational security that was nonetheless adequate to satisfy far-right grifters, and a far bigger spend on the part of Russia to play in this year's election. And read it, too, for how often even the producers who worked for Tenet, who also appear to have known the gig, thought that Tucker Carlson's video pretending to be wowed by a Russian supermarket was just too much. It just feels like overt shilling. Nevertheless, they shilled anyway. So I'm sure that's the feeling you would get. It probably makes good sense to sit down and read the indictment for entertainment purposes. We won't do it here today, but I just thought I would point out. By the way, second in the queue, I think, for Marcy. It's on the front page of her queue. I don't know which one comes next. But there is a Steve Bannon thing here. All Trump's Recidivists is the name of that piece. Steve Bannon was actually the first known Trump pardon recipient to return to crime after the pardon, but he kicked off a growing trend. It's really about a different thing, but apropos that Steve Bannon is on the front page for all that. Again, the mastermind of bringing together the concept of red pilling and the video gaming communities and this sort of bro vote really kind of all rests with, I think, and originates with him. So, well worth the time to divert into what Marcy was saying. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, the Malaysia scam, it's funny, I am having difficulty bringing that story back to mind and who was involved in all of that. It's more than 10 years ago now, but finally found some Google search terms that would bring up some names, including, remember Joshua Treviño? His Wikipedia entry tells us about that. And he's, of course, involved in many controversies, but there is a mention here of Treviño, and The Guardian responded by, where are we? Who knows? The Guardian later severed its relationship with Treviño, citing his previously undisclosed partnership with Malaysian business interests, and then a little section about that. Between May 2008 and April 2011, Treviño was paid $389,000 by the government of Malaysia, its ruling party, or interests closely aligned with either. Sound familiar? His work was to organize a covert opinion campaign against former Malaysian Deputy Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. None of those involved with the campaign disclosed that the funds paid were provided by the government of Malaysia. Treviño, in turn, made payments of up to $36,000 to several conservative American opinion writers. He kept the bulk of that money, I guess, who went on to write pro-government pieces on behalf of Malaysia, including his former employer, Chuck DeVore. Claire Berlinski, Ben Domenech, that's definitely a name we've heard, Rachel Ehrenfeld, and Brad Jackson. I don't think I really know any of the rest of them, but outlets in which their work appeared include the Huffington Post, the San Francisco Examiner, the Washington Times, National Review, and Red State. When questioned in 2011 by the Politico website about whether Malaysian interests funded his activities, Treviño flatly denied it. I was never on any Malaysian entity's payroll, and I resent your assumption that I was. Let me ask you this. What in the effing hell is anybody doing giving you $389,000? What do you do that's worth that? Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. It's suspect on its face. In 2013, Treviño filed a statement with the Foreign Registration Office at the Department of Justice 5 years after being required to make the information public. He explained the late filing by stating he was unaware of the requirement. Oh, okay. Well, now you are aware. Thanks for doing it. Britain's Guardian banned him from writing as a result of having failed to disclose his Malaysian government ties. A lawyer advised him to contact the Justice Department about filing. Treviño stated, "They let me do a retroactive filing, and that was that." See, I'm not guilty of anything. By the way, other names caught up in all of that, according to the quick Google search. Seth Mandel, who, by the way, is the husband of Bethany Mandel, the kooky wackadoodle Karen lady who ran and got crushed for school board in Montgomery County, Maryland just recently. And, of course, as previously mentioned, Ben Domenech. So there you have it. An ongoing scam. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Boy, there's an awful lot swirling through my head right now, but I got to try and dig back and find those articles, or my recitation, my read through some of those articles about Steve Bannon and the early days of the red pilling garbage from Discord servers and trying to engage otherwise politically disengaged gamers and turn them into MAGA-type conservatives. It really was kind of fascinating, that whole plan and the description of it. And just yesterday or the other day, as we were reading Amanda Marcotte's summary of the J.D. Vance bro votosphere, and this overlaps so well with the Atlantic's article that Greg brought up by Helen Lewis. And I don't know, it just sort of all seems to be coming together. But, going all the way back to the early days of Gamergate, when the misogyny underlying Gamergate, that was really its whole, reason for being. And how could that get politicized, and how did it, how do you turn something like weirdo hatred for women over arguing about video games into politics? And, the answer has presented itself in the form of Blake Masters and J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and the weird manosphere and the wacko Andrew Tate under house arrest in Romania and caught outright sex trafficking women, which of course, because every accusation is a confession, became a central tenet of the QAnon conspiracy and fed the rest of these weirdos who, I don't know, the whole thing is insane, but it actually hangs together, I guess, in an insane way. And then, of course, if you go even further back in our description on this program and online elsewhere of Trump world as a sex cult, and engaging these weirdo incels by saying, we can reverse that problem for you. We can get you laid, essentially, is what it says. And wouldn't that be the most powerful thing anybody could ever do for you? Forget lowering your taxes. We'll get you hooked up to where you're making a lot of money so then you can cry about your taxes again, and then you can do things that idiots like you have been convinced are the key to getting chicks, buy fast cars and fancy crap and God knows what, and lift weights and pretend you're an MMA guy. And I don't know, somehow women will fall all over themselves to get in line for you. And for some of them, it apparently works out. And they get on the radio and they talk about how it worked out for them. And you too can do the same thing. And I don't know, I guess if any of them would be willing to set up a Josh Treviño type situation for you, maybe Josh Treviño was the most generous of the bunch. He actually gave away some of this money to other people to make them do the same thing. No indication that Tim Pool was giving away any of that money, keeping it for himself. Okay, there's a million things that I need to get to, and some of them are related and some of them aren't. Best thing I can do is just throw as many things as possible at you and see what you can do with it. There was a story. I mentioned that there was a trend. There's now a trend of, hey, Trump is actually crumbling before our very eyes, and it's worth saying. And I think maybe the first biggest crack in the dam I saw coming out of this weekend, anyway, I'm sure someone else has done this earlier. Certainly there are people writing about how mentally unfit and mentally unstable Donald Trump is. But this was a big deal. It was circulated widely via social media from MSNBC. The author of this piece is Zishan Alim, who writes under the headline, "Questions surrounding Trump's mental acuity are a real 2024 story." We've all been waiting for this story, so let's share it. His speech is becoming harder and harder to understand. Just flat out says it. It is an opinion piece, of course, but an important one, and one that I think has inspired a lot of follow-up, including, I think, in part, not that he wasn't already on the subject, Greg Sargent's excellent list of rewritten headlines cited by Greg earlier. Here's what Zishan has to say. The words below were taken verbatim, and it's always important to do that, verbatim from a campaign speech former President Donald Trump delivered in Potterville, Michigan, Thursday, when he was attempting, at least initially, to criticize Kamala Harris's record in San Francisco, presumably referring to her tenure as district attorney there. That's the setup. And is Potterville, Michigan, the thing that I have another report here? Is Potterville near Howell, Michigan, or were they separate events? Because Rosalind McGregor filed something for us regarding a stop in Howell, Michigan. And now I have to look. I'm going to look on the map. Where is Howell, Michigan? And where is Howell, Michigan in relation to, what is it? Potterville, Michigan. Let's just go and see. I'm just curious whether that might be the same thing or two different stops in close proximity. Let's see. They're about just under 50 miles apart here. So they may very well be, I don't know, two separate events. Could be the same event. I don't know. Both looks to me like what? Suburb/exurb possibly of Lansing, Michigan. But there you have it. Okay. Where were we? We're reading. Well, let's read this thing first. So again, verbatim taken from a speech in which he's trying to criticize Kamala Harris. And I got to tell you, I mean, it's sad and scary, but it's a little bit like listening to this show. We keep admitting it here that we get disjointed. We follow different threads. We try to weave things together. But the basic difference, I think, is that we're usually making some comparison that makes some sense. And although we get lost in threads and sub-threads and sometimes forget to sew the whole thing together, we're not running for president here. And we get a shot at doing it again tomorrow. So here is Trump. We'll do the Trump voice and everything verbatim from his speech, talking about Kamala Harris. She destroyed the city of San Francisco. And I own a big building there. No, I shouldn't talk about it. But that's okay. I don't give a damn because this is what I'm doing. Okay. I mean, that's the philosophy of the show. Sure. I should say it's the finest city in the world. Sell and get the hell out of there, right? I see what he's trying to do. I'll say it's a great city so that someone will buy my crappy property and I'll be able to leave. I don't even know if he owns anything in San Francisco. But anyway, I digress. I should say it's the greatest city in the world. Sell and get the hell out of there, right? But I can't do that I don't care, I lost billions of dollars. That's true, but not just there. Somebody said, what do you think you lost? Well, billions of dollars. I just effing said it. What do you think you lost? I said, probably 2-3 billion. That's okay. I don't care. They say, you think you'd do it again? And that's the least of it. Nobody. They always say, I don't know if you know, Lincoln was horribly treated. Assassinated, but whatever. Jefferson was pretty horribly. They said he was a slave owner. Andrew Jackson, they say, was the worst of all. And that he was treated worse than any other president. I said, do that study again. Because I think there's nobody close to Trump. I even got shot. And who the hell knows where that came from, right? Weird, funny, he's on 10 different subjects. Lincoln, horribly treated. Okay, that's one way of putting it. Sir, this was a campaign speech in which you were supposed to criticize your main opponent in the election, Kamala Harris. What happened to that? Lincoln, they say. Another thing, water comes out of the faucet. You can't even wash your hair anymore. Sir, Kamala Harris. So our writer says, this is impossible to follow. I'm bad like that too. I followed it. I understand what he was doing. I understand why these thoughts occurred to him. And I have no more control over it than he does. But he's supposed to get nuclear codes. This is impossible to follow, and it is dumb as well. I mean, there's a logical continuum, but it's barely there and doesn't matter. Anyway, Trump's asides stack atop each other with such density that it's dizzying for even a professional political observer to discern what he's trying to get at. I can do it, but it is dizzying. He's right. Why is a presidential candidate leapfrogging from talking about Harris's policy record to the bath he took on a property he owns where he ranks on the list of horribly treated presidents? Okay, that's a lot of leaps. And by the way, if you put it to him that way, he would say, I didn't take a bath on the property. I took a shower on the property. The water barely comes out of there. And the thing they're doing with the plumbing, these people are flushing the toilet 10 times, 15 times. Because he mistakes everything as literal. Anyway, so his asides themselves are often unintelligible. What is this alleged anecdote about his San Francisco property meant to convey? What does he even mean about how horribly presidents were treated? I understand it all, but it just doesn't make any difference, To cap it all off, Trump casually tossed out an insidious conspiracy theory. He implies we don't know who shot him, when of course we do. Trump has been embedded in the public consciousness as the rule breaker for so long that it can be easy to forget how far he is from fulfilling the basic requirement of a politician to speak clearly. And that's an issue. Trump's speeches seem to be growing more discursive and difficult to comprehend by the day. Those speeches are making it hard, if not impossible, for people listening to them to understand what he wants to do with his power in office. And they're reportedly turning off voters, and that is also a big issue. They're also raising questions over whether the chaos he would sow in office would be even less intentional than it was last time. Trump's deteriorating ability to communicate clearly is a consequential feature of his 2024 candidacy. That deterioration may not have been as salient when Trump, 78, had an 81-year-old President Joe Biden as an opponent, but it's all the more clear as he now faces off against 59-year-old Vice President Kamala Harris. Questions about Biden's mental acuity were rightly raised in this election cycle. Well, for argument's sake, sure. Questions about Trump's mental acuity should be raised too, you think? There's an embedded video, I think, of the Potterville speech here from Aaron Rupar illustrates the issue. The incoherence of the Potterville speech is just one of countless examples. During a recent event in Wisconsin, Trump's response to a question from the audience about reducing inflation entailed darting from his belief that Americans don't eat bacon anymore to his assertion that wind energy doesn't work. During remarks this spring, he stumbled from an attack on Biden's age into a nonsensical reverie about the actor Cary Grant, which then spun off into an anecdote about a conversation he had with Michael Jackson. Not weird. Compared even to his first term in office, Trump's inability to focus on one train of thought appears to be growing significantly worse. I shouldn't talk, but I'm not. He is, this writer. Trump's supporters are noticing. A Guardian reporter pointed out that during a recent rally in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, many audience members left as Trump rambled on for nearly 2 hours. I voted for him in 2016, and I had a Trump flag in the front yard, a member of that audience told The Guardian. But after listening to that, I'm actually afraid of Trump being president again. I don't know what he was talking about half the time. Perhaps he was always like that, but he seems worse, more unstable. Well, that's a quote. That tracks with reports from earlier in the campaign season of large numbers of audience members exiting Trump's speeches and his supporter complaints about him, quote, babbling. Trump has managed to elude some questions about his cognitive functioning for a number of reasons. First, for a great deal of time, he had as a foil Biden, who not only had shown a demonstrable decline in his ability to communicate, but also seemed to have less energy than Trump. During their debate, Trump was often rambling, but Biden was barely audible before saying things that undermined his own policies in baffling ways. Also, as I've pointed out in the past, Trump's qualities as an entertainer, as an agent of disinformation, and as a proud policy illiterate have made it easier for him to mask his apparent decline and to identify its precise significance. Lastly, there was a tension between narratives on the left that Trump was an extremely dangerous autocrat and claims that Trump might lack mental competence to govern. These two qualities can exist in the same leader, but pointing out both qualities requires a distinct communication strategies distinct communication strategies that operate in sharply different and sometimes clashing emotional registers. And by the way, I would point out here that the usual deflection from this person isn't competent, because every once in a while, I mean, it's not quite the same accusation, but if you say this person running for president who's nominated by this major party isn't smart, George W. Bush, for instance. People said, doesn't matter, they'll surround themselves with competent people, and, he's just a figurehead. People said it about Reagan, people said it about Bush, people said it about, I'm sure Republicans say it about Democrats all the time, and they may even mean it, but they believe that competent people will take the reins. And that we saw that was not the case in Trump's first administration. But the thing you should be worried about, and the reason why Project 2025 resonates is, well, it doesn't matter that he's an idiot. We are telling you up front. He can't tell you what he's for. We'll tell you. It's Project 2025. And then when it became unpopular, I'm not for that anymore. I don't know what it is. I never heard of it before. Whatever. But we've been handed the playbook, and this is what we're going to attempt to implement, whether we're competent to the task or not. It doesn't matter that the guy occupying the office is a blithering idiot. This is what we're doing. That's why it's relevant. And that's why people are rejecting his campaign, because the ideas are terribly unpopular. Now, back to the article here. As my colleague Jim Downey has pointed out, it's linked here, Biden's exit from the race not only sharpens public awareness of Trump's age and communication struggles, it also shields Democrats from accusations of hypocrisy. Now, as Harris energetically lays out how she wants to improve the country, Trump's bizarre speeches look even more concerning than they did before. After all, during his first term, Trump's imprecise, impulsive way of communicating made him exceptionally dangerous when speaking about sensitive diplomatic and national security issues, such as in his policies toward North Korea. Those risks will only be greater if he becomes president again, and it's genuinely chilling to imagine a less capable, less focused Trump handling another major public health crisis, such as COVID, for instance. Trump's seeming decline isn't his worst quality, but it likely would make many of his vices worse. I do have tucked away here in pocket probably the same article to which he's referring from The Guardian about how people are growing disenchanted in his audiences. And let me just scroll back and see if I think I saw it just a while back when I was scrolling during the break. And I think it would be interesting it is the Guardian article. And it's a long one, but I think it would cover much of the same ground. And we heard the highlights according to this author. Anyway, the highlights that supported this point. And the point of this article was the one we really needed to get across. The Guardian piece was, are Trump's campaign rallies energizing his base or sowing doubt? Right. That was the main point there. And I recommend it to you. I'll include it in the roundup so that you can read that article as well. But we have limited time for today, and I wanted to get on to one or two other things here. Let's see. There's definitely, it's a hard choice about which ones to add here. And I'll go with, that'll never work. I can't get this one. This is listed as a 49-minute read. That would take me days to get through. But there's a very interesting and, telling article that synthesizes some of today's points, both the Russia bribery stuff, programming, and the dangers of Trump and his mental decline, etc. Put all this together under this headline from the Citizens for Ethics, Citizens for what? What's CREW? Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. And CREW, yes. Is there an author, a single author for this piece identified? I don't think so. I don't know. But this is a CREW report. The intensifying threat of Donald Trump's emoluments. Well worth your time. And let's see if we can give you a taste of what this is about here. Donald Trump, it says here in this little summary box, I guess, will violate the foreign and domestic emoluments clauses if he serves as president and fails to divest from his businesses. Now, this could easily have been published in 2016, and it was. We certainly covered this thing, and he did, in fact, go ahead and violate those emoluments clauses right from the get-go. It was obvious even as he was a candidate, it was obvious as he was just opening the Trump Hotel at the time, and the government would have to waive the prohibition against allowing any part of the ownership of the operations group to be a government employee, and this was the biggest government employee there was, and inexplicably they waived the whole thing. And then that hotel, among other things that he used, but that hotel became the major engine for emoluments laundering. And so, of course, he will be doing it again. That's the major reason he's running again, both laundering the emoluments and staying out of jail. But since nobody seems eager to put him in jail even when they actually convict the guy, I think the emoluments might be an even bigger concern. And certainly the ability to launder those emoluments and pay for a defense that will obfuscate for long enough that he can die without facing any of the consequences of his criminal activity, that might be paramount. All right. So as we were saying, likely sources of his illegal emoluments would include, but not be limited to, Truth Social and its parent company, Trump Media and Technology Group, and that'll be the most direct way you can do it. That stock is plummeting. By the way, I did see on social media somebody noting that it had hit $17.76. Freedom, independence, and liberty. That's the price of your stock. Of course, it was up close in the 80s at some point. It's not even worth $17.76 at this point. They might be enjoying that too much. I'm glad for the number of people who have lost their shirts on this. But then eventually, when some Saudi sovereign wealth fund or Malaysian or Russian or whatever just says, I'm just going to buy this stock and let Donald Trump cash out of it and put my money directly in his pockets, and then he'll do my bidding, that'll be a violation of the emoluments clause. That's how we'll do it. There will also be Trump World Tower. That's the one that's right outside of the UN Plaza, where international actors can just very easily snap up things and pay him rent or buy condos off of him. Saudi funded the Live Golf League, right? Don't forget about that one. Well, Saudi funded a lot of these things. Saudis own, I think, a floor or two of the Trump World Tower, by the way, as well. And real estate developments in Oman, Saudi Arabia, again, and the United Arab Emirates. Congress should pass legislation to make it simpler to enforce the emoluments clauses. It shouldn't be necessary. I mean, it's in first principles. It's right there in the Constitution. You can't do it. Well, show me where it's written in the Constitution. I can't do it. Right here in the emoluments clauses. Well, what if we just decide it isn't? Right? I know. It's crazy, but I've been saying it for a long time, and I don't know, maybe somebody or some people are late to coming to the realization. They're forging electoral college votes. What else could you do? What could get worse than that? You could just forge parts of the Constitution. things that I wish were in there that aren't, things that are in there that I wish weren't. Just forge them and say, no, the Constitution doesn't say emoluments are illegal. It says they're great when Donald Trump does it. And if you can find 5 members of the Black Robed Society, until we expand the damn thing, right now, 5 will do it. 5 say, I don't know. I look at the Constitution and it said the opposite of everything else. What your lying eyes are telling you, and what are you going to do about it? There's nothing in the Constitution now that tells us that there is anything you can do about it. On the other hand, if you can forge the Constitution, go for it. Let's forge something to do afterwards. But it only works for Donald Trump, apparently, and only 3 votes for letting a Democrat do this. So Congress should pass legislation to make it simpler to enforce the emoluments clause. I don't know if that's going to work, but sure, start there. It's just a tragedy that it's necessary. Until then, the executive branch employees must obey the law and may not use their authority to enable illegal emoluments to flow to a sitting president. Good luck. Inspectors General and the Committees on Foreign Investment in the United States must also investigate Trump's potential emoluments as they occur. That would be nice. There's a long explainer for why it's a violation of the emoluments clauses for him to do these various things, and where those, in more detail about what those potential sources are. I believe we've been over this ground. I believe you all understand the emoluments clause, but this is a good, long, lengthy explainer and a great synthesis of why it's problematic that he's in mental decline, that there are grifters surrounding him who will make all this stuff work nonetheless, that they have shown us the plans, that every Republican accusation is a confession, and that they are, at the same time, right-wing influencer world is almost indicted or unindicted co-conspirators in a case being brought right now in the run-up to the election, showing you just what lengths the Russians, and probably eventually they'll tell you about the Saudis, are going to influence our elections and elect their preferred candidate. There are many other things that we need to add to this, including one I know we won't have time for today, a 10-minute read from ProPublica on the Accelerationists app, how Telegram became the center of gravity for what? For a new breed of domestic terrorists. Interesting. Not even where I was pointing at before, but Telegram basically now to be viewed as an evolution from the old Discord method of communication with the weird and disaffected. But we'll see if we can't work that into perhaps the Friday show, along with, I have further installments from Liberal Thinking to get to about the Trump sentencing, which draws even closer. Gonna have to get to some of that. Probably gonna have to save Rosalind McGregor's contribution until tomorrow, even though, again, we grow further and further away from the Trump appearance about which she was talking. Let's throw in one more piece of the puzzle here that, where should we use the Guardian's piece about this? Or there's one from a little bit earlier about, I guess we better start with the Guardian one because it's harder and harder to scroll and find these things. Just as I was saying, forging those electoral college votes, just a reminder that that's going on, and that state Republican parties are now renominating these fake electors who were on the fake slates, the forged slates of 2020. Michigan, yes, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, and Nevada submit election deniers who attempted to elect Trump in 2020. This thanks to the reporting of Alice Herman for The Guardian. The state Republican parties have nominated 14 of the 84 fake electors from the 2020 presidential election to serve again as Republican Party presidential electors, an indication of the legitimacy that election deniers continue to hold in some quarters of the GOP. And of course, that's because they are the party leaders there, and they typically do use them for electors, but you'd think they'd have soured on them this time around. But nope. The Republican parties of Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, and Nevada have each nominated one or more electors who attempted to submit themselves as electors for Donald Trump and Mike Pence in 2020, despite the former president losing their states, sometimes by a lot. Presidential electors typically perform a rote but critical behind-the-scenes role in elections. You know what it is, but they're explaining it for their UK audience. In 2020, despite a majority of voters in New Mexico, Nevada, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan voting for Biden, Republican electors went ahead and submitted certificates for Trump, mimicking the process they would have performed if Trump had won there, in the hopes that they would just simply accept those forged certificates and cast electoral votes for the person who had not won. So these people making a comeback, not persona non grata within their parties. But by the way, I mean, I guess it's probably worth mentioning here, and I guess I'll have to look for this in yesterday's reposted Blue Sky social media stuff. Let's get our music rolling here. Remember, let's roll call those states again that we were just reading about. Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Nevada. Michigan, and I mean, we've heard so much about the Republican Party in Michigan and the way it faced bankruptcy and internal divisions, a civil war, dueling chairs at some point, maybe even still happening. We heard all about that with Christina Caramo and her wacko bunch from Rosalind McGregor, and we've heard it for months. Michigan, like a lot of these state parties, already pretty much out of money. And I saw somebody saying on Blue Sky yesterday, what have I got here? Nonsense and shenanigans from Anna Lee HQ on Blue Sky. Just grabbing hold of the post from Martin Conca. Do I have that right? About Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, is, as they say here, ripping the copper out of the walls, the copper piping to sell off, right, over at the RNC. Described as a perfect 10 out of 10, no notes. Martin's comment being, I think it's underrated how much the RNC, state parties, and down ballot GOP campaigns pushed Trump over the line. Incidentally, Trump's daughter-in-law ripping the copper out of the walls. Half the swing state GOPs are bankrupt, and most of the GOP Senate candidates are polling like, well, we'll say crap. It's all coming together. The whole thing could collapse in on itself at some point, and I'd like to live to see it. All right, well, we got lots to get to tomorrow, lots to get to today, though, for Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. All the good stuff that we may have missed and all the good stuff we may have missed about the things we covered coming next.